Welcome back to the show. Let's Get Racing is what our second segment is called, where Brent Zarafa, Nick Quinn and Michael Felgate put their heads together about some of the racing topics that are going around in Australia at the moment. And first and foremost, I want to ask you about 3,200 metre races, boys. We saw the Queen's Cup on the weekend in Brisbane. What a time-honoured race this was. A quality field of Group 1 potentially horses. I'm being facetious, I'm being rude, because away from the two big ones, Sydney and Melbourne Cup, 3,200 metre racing is dead and buried. I
don't tend to agree that it's dead and buried. Like, obviously the quality's not there, but I still enjoy them. I think they're great spectacles. We see here with the Queen's Cup, may the horse be magic. Jay Ford might have got a little bit of itchy feet and gone before the turn there. But recently we had a stayers final in Sydney over 3,200 metres. It was probably the best race of the day. Road de Jour and adroitly going toe-to-toe right the way down the straight. I think we still need to keep them on the calendar, because if they fall away, we'll just see more and more internationals coming for a race like the Melbourne Cup, which they already do. But we've got to protect what we've got just to keep something there for the local horses.
OK, Michael, your thoughts?
Look, obviously they're struggling, but they'll never be dead and buried, because the greatest race that we have every year is 3,200 metres. So you can't have that as the only 3,200 metre race in Australia on Melbourne Cup Day. I don't know about running them in the middle of winter, because you're not really going to get the good horses racing in them. I still think that there's a theory that towards the end of the Spring Carnival, for those horses who don't quite make it to the Melbourne Cup, there could be some type of consolation race. I know we have the Lexus over 2,500 metres, but if you're going to be training these horses to run 3,200, and the reason why the internationals are killing us every time they come out here is because the locals aren't, one, bred for it, and two, don't race over it.
Nick?
I get really, really annoyed when people complain about these 3,200 metre races. We don't have enough of them. I mean, every year come cup time, everyone goes, oh, there's only like 3 or 4 Australian horses, and there could be less than that this year. And then we put them on these races on the program, and people go, oh, 3,200 metre race, leave me out. No, you can't have the best of both worlds. If we're going to produce Melbourne Cup winners, we need races over the Melbourne Cup distance.
Yeah, but from a
program, we've got quite a few in Victoria. We just put little jumps in during the racetrack around there as well.
But I'm saying, from a programming perspective, what's the point of having one in winter, as you said, Michael, and as Brent sort of alluded to, the two that we've had in Sydney, the 2 horses involved and the 4 horses involved. Roy de Jour was beaten out of sight in that race on Saturday. So you've got to correlate the biggest race of the year to these races. No point in having the Melbourne Cup one out and then having these other races in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Like, adroitly's not going to be a Melbourne Cup campaigner, neither's Road de Jour or Spachenka or May the Horse Be Magic. But to look at, I think they're pretty good spectacles myself.
OK, your thoughts are welcome on our website, puntersparadise.com.au. We like to play a word game each and every week on the show. This time it's surrounding the Caulfield Guineas. You first, Michael Felgate. All Too Hard will be what on Caulfield Guineas Day?
He'll be winning the Caulfield Guineas like Weekend Hustler did, and like Who We Got You did, with a leg in the air. He's my favourite horse, and I think he could be something special.
All Too Hard will be winning. Nick, try and put some common sense into the conversation. All Too Hard.
He was one of my favourites as well until Piero knocked him off, and I'm still paying that bit off. But anyway, look, obviously a leading chance. There's a lot of horses, though, at this time of year that have got to be considered chances for the Guineas. One I've got my eye on is Rock Strata from the Mick Price stable, so keep an eye out on that one.
Have those splinters going, by the way. Any chance you can make an actually definitive comment?
I've tipped you 100 to 1 shot.
So All Too Hard will be what, Nick?
I won't say in the breeding barn. I don't want to upset anyone. All Too Hard will be winning the Caulfield.
We got there eventually.
Have you boys heard of a little horse called Piero?
Piero, perhaps?
Well, he was the dominant 2-year-old of the season. All Too Hard, he beat a couple of horses in Melbourne over...
Size produce.
Yeah, and your best 2-year-old had already gone, Samaretti had already come to Sydney. Piero beat her, then beat him, and then won the Champagne Stakes. He's unbeaten 5 from 5. He's got a pedigree to suggest that he'll be better at 3. I can't understand why Piero won't be favourite and won't be winning the Caulfield Guineas.
So All Too Hard will be...
running a place.
And I reckon All Too Hard will be under the odds on Caulfield Guineas Day, because of blokes like Nick Quinn and Michael Felgate having their thousands on. It'll be about 6-4. And once again, we'll...
A little horse like Smart Missile reminds me of All Too Hard. There'll be a big boom around it, and come race day, I don't think it'll get the job done.
Okay. Smart Missile reminds me of a horse called Piero coming down with a big boom from Sydney.
Ooh. Oh, well, he is probably the best 2-year-old we've seen since Luskin Star. I think it's a pretty... I think we've got a pretty harsh...
Smart Missile Style won a lead-up race to the Golden Slipper.
Golden Rose.
Golden Rose.
And there's a Golden
and
Slipper.
the Slipper, and then got beaten out of sight. No, it got scratched, obviously. Got beaten out of sight when it took on the big gun. So we'll wait and see. The tradition continues between the Melbourne and Sydney boys. All Too Hard is a Sydney horse, boys, by the way. I'd just like to point out. I know he might have won a couple of races down there, but we'll claim him as Sydney.
Yeah, he certainly is. He's trained out at Rosehill at the moment. I think if you went out and seen him, he'd be there.
Likes Melbourne a lot better, though.
He likes Melbourne a lot better. We had an email across the weekend from a disgruntled punter talking about Audacious Spirit. Now, I wasn't aware of what happened, but take us through it, Brett.
Yeah, this is an interesting one with Audacious Spirit. It was heavily backed in the 7th event at Brisbane at Eagle Farm last Saturday and pulled a shoe on the off-4 on the way to the gates. And the farrier tried to replate him behind the barriers, but he kept thrashing out. They were taking too much time. They couldn't get the shoe on. And the interesting thing here, he was scratched, but if it was a hind plate, they could have taken the other one off and he would have raced without any shoes. But the rules state that a horse must race with both front plates on because it's understood that there's a little bit more traction involved with their front hooves. So, interesting point, 380 into 310. All concerned were pretty disappointed. The connections, Gillian Heinrich, the trainer, obviously they thought they were going to be a winning hope. But the punters still got their money back. Interesting one. What do you think, boys?
Well, I'm not a expert on being a farrier or anything to do with horseshoes, so I don't know how much of an impact it would have not racing with a shoe on. But I just know that goes into the punting hard luck files. If you're on the thing that was backed, you thought it was a good thing. It's just another way before you go into the barriers that you don't get to collect. Well, it's one of those that goes into the stories. Nick, what's your thoughts? I know you're very, very shoe conscious for all animals, not just four-legged.
Shoe, tie, and hair.
I don't know why the punters would be bluing so much. Imagine if they ran the horse and it ran a nice 6 and they'd be saying, well, it should have been scratched. So you can't have the best of both worlds. It was a late scratching. If you had a bet, yes, you got overs, but you got your money back. So at the end of the day, I think common sense prevailed.
Well, that brings me very quickly. When you see a horse play up in the gates and it's you're on it, I'm saying I think there should be just a blank rule. Scratch, because the odds of you winning 0 and none.
Yeah, you just want to get on the exchanges and put your money back because you don't really want to be...
You just want your money back. What about you two boys? Scratch?
Absolutely, especially if you've had a good go. I mean, it depends also how bad they play up. I know one which I couldn't get my money back on was Maldivian in the Caulfield Cup all those years ago. He was scratched, but pre-post markets, unfortunately, no money back for the punter there. If it just rears up, doesn't hit its head or anything like that, maybe you can run around.
The all-in market.
You never really want to be on, though, do you? You're never really as bullish as when they play up or they do have a problem. But it's very different here in Australia to overseas. A friend of mine was watching a race at the Vale the other night. We were talking about the Vale last week. One went through the front of the gates over 1,000 metres, ran the 1,000 metres. They pulled it up and I thought, oh, that'll be scratched. And they sent it back and sent it around. It ran a nice 8th at $1.90.
Well played, Nick. Give my regards to that friend. Time for another break here. This time we're going to look back at Nashra Willer, who came back this weekend since a little holiday. Of course, he rode a winner.
She Rocks My World. Soapbox is coming up the outside now, followed by Weepoo. Gullis tapped up at the 200. Here's Soapbox on the outside with She Rocks My World, the centre. With 100 metres to go, it's Soapbox up to She Rocks My World from Gullis. She Rocks My World in the centre, just in front of Soapbox, who's wandering. They hit the line. She Rocks My World. Punched out, beat Soapbox Gullis.